Good morning, everybody. So my name is Melissa Armstrong. I'm the CEO of Legacy Link. We're so glad that you're able to join us today for our ACAP meeting. As you know, every month we do these on a Tuesday where we come together and talk about different issues from caregiving. Today, I'm so excited to be able to introduce Gwenyth Johnson. She's a registered dietitian and has an illustrious background within the field of aging. From working on the state unit on aging to now having her own consulting business, she is really the main source of information for all things food. And so as you see, she's going to be presenting Nutrition 101. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Gwenyth.
Good morning, and I apologize for being late, you all. It has been a rough morning, but if you can't hear me, let me know. And the good news is I did test this morning. I do not have COVID. It's something else. Let's get to nutrition. If you have questions as we're going through, let's stop and talk about it. I think it's better to handle things that way. And if there's something going on that you're really curious about, there's probably someone else in the room that has that same question. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about the basics, and we'll start with macronutrients. If we can figure out the macronutrients, we can pretty much do anything. And I do try to use the scientific terms, so if you're in a doctor's office and they happen to use them, you're already comfortable with them. How are they different from each other? Should we all eat the same foods? Now, if we're talking about you and the one you're caring for and you're related, more than likely you should. But if you're caring for someone with a different background, maybe not. And age plays a role in that as well, so we'll talk about that. And then how do we provide enough calories, enough nutrition as caregivers, particularly as eating changes for the one you're caring for. So we'll talk about those things as well. But again, anything else that comes up, let's take some time and talk about it. So fat has 4 grams, or wait a minute, protein has 4 calories per gram. Stop, reset. Protein, there are 3 macronutrients. Good grief, y'all. There are 3 macronutrients. We have protein, we have fat, and we have carbohydrates. Now, the first we're going to talk about here is protein, and you'll notice that 5 pounds of muscle is much smaller than 5 pounds of fat. So there are big differences there. Protein has 4 calories per gram, whereas fat has 9. So we're talking about the same size thing, weight-wise, has completely different calorie levels. And carbohydrates have 4 grams as well, like protein. But it takes all 3 of them for us to be able to function appropriately. Proteins. The building blocks of proteins are amino acids. Are you all familiar with amino acids? And the concept of complete proteins. So there are proteins that our body doesn't make. They're called essential amino acids. And those we must consume. Some sources of protein are complete, and that means that they have all of the amino acids that our bodies do not make. Those are meat, poultry, fish, but also quinoa, buckwheat, blue-green algae, which I know was on everybody's lunch menu today, and soybeans. Some proteins we can get a complete protein if we do combinations. So beans and rice. We wonder where some of these dishes might have come from, but it really is in completing our diet. So red beans and rice, peas and rice. If we're talking from New Orleans to Jamaica, grains and beans, nuts and grains. So all of those things can be combined. What are some ways that you might be able to mix some of things up to get a complete protein? What about nuts and grains? What does that look like? Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe? So we did a combo protein right there with peanut butter. Well, we don't even have to add the jelly, a peanut butter sandwich. We can do nuts and grains. That's what we just did. Grains and beans. What might that look like? Bean burrito. I love it. Very nice. So there are all kinds of things that are very accessible that are combined proteins for us to eat. As we age, proteins become very important because we are made of protein. It is what our cells are. That might actually be the next slide. Nope, that's fat. It's what our cells are. It's what all kinds of chemicals in our bodies are that are needed for digesting other foods. So our basic look at protein. Now fats, the building blocks of fats are glycerol and fatty acids. There are 3 types of fats. Our saturated fat, who knows what a saturated fat is? An example. I'm sorry?
Is that the bad fat?
It is the bad fats. So, but that doesn't mean we can't ever have them. Saturated fats are more closely associated with cholesterol in our bodies. So when we think about eggs, have been in trouble since as long as I think I've been alive. One year you can eat eggs, the next year you can't eat eggs, then you can, then you can't. Well, you can if you have arthritis and you're a woman over 40. So it got really complicated. Saturated fats are the ones that we think of as bad fats. They tend to be more associated with that cholesterol, which is more associated with heart disease. What it means is that on those fatty acids that are attached to that glycerol, there are places for hydrogen atoms. The fewer hydrogen atoms on those connectors, the more reactive that fat will be. One that is completely hydrogenated is a saturated fat. So what do you think that means about hydrogenated vegetable oil? It acts like a saturated fat because we've gone in and artificially saturated it. Saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So if you think of coconut oil, it's a solid at room temperature oil. Or if you think of Crisco. But we all think Crisco is healthier because it's made out of vegetables. But it too is very similar to a saturated fat. Monounsaturated fats are ones that we hear a great deal about, and those are things like olive oil. Canola oil has some, avocado oil, all those fancy oils. If you go into the grocery store now, there's like the usable ones that everybody gets, the vegetable, the olive, and then you get hazelnut oil and asparagus oil or whatever. There's a whole line. Most of those are monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. These types of fats are the two we want to concentrate on, but we want more mono than poly. So if we eat a bag of potato chips, which one do you think we're getting? It's on a polyunsaturated fat mostly. There may be some saturated, but they tend to be fried in peanut oil, canola oil, things like that. But if we're looking at where we get our fats and we're saying, okay, we had some potato chips and we have these polyunsaturated fats, but we also have something I cooked in olive oil and some fish. Now those are higher in the monounsaturated, but also in that type called omega-3 fatty acids, which are an unsaturated fat and found in fish and some nuts and seeds and things like that. The omega-3 fatty acids, we really want those to be higher than our traditional polyunsaturated fats. Okay, I know I added another kind of fat in here. You all look like you were getting it too well, and I thought I'd get complicated. So really what types of fats we get in our diet make a difference in all kinds of our systems. If we get too much of the saturated or too much of the poly, we tend to line our arteries, we tend to slow down our systems. The omega-3s and the monounsaturated fats tend to facilitate activity in the body that we need to have happen. And here's the basic breakdown. 10% or less of calories from saturated fat. So not get rid of it altogether. but just reduce the amount that we're eating. And then carbohydrates. More than fat. These are the most vilified nutrients on the planet, I think, right now. But you know that glucose is your body's or your brain's favorite nutrient. It's what it eats. So if we eliminate carbohydrates from our diet altogether, are we doing ourselves any favors? Last time you all were on 285 or 85 or 985, did you think that those people had any carbohydrates or glucose for their brain? I could tell you the ones I drove up here with did not. So getting rid of carbohydrates from our diet is not a good idea. First of all, your brain needs it. Secondly, it's where most of our fiber comes from, which we need every so often to kind of help clear things out. So all of these nutrients do lots of good stuff. The building blocks of carbohydrates are simple carbohydrates. So glucose, sucrose, galactose, all of those are different types of simple sugars. Glucose is probably the most simple. It's a mono by itself. So simple carbohydrates would be things like honey, like processed carbohydrates are more simple than whole wheat or whole grain. And the thing that we have to remember about that, the difference between simple and complex, is that the time that your body takes to break down a complex carbohydrate gives your body more time to deal with it. Imagine eating a teaspoon of sugar on an empty stomach. That goes into your stomach and straight into your bloodstream, just about. I mean, it has to move through your intestines, but it's very fast. Whereas if you eat the same amount of sprouted grain as you had in that sugar, your body has to process it, break it down, and turn it into its simplest form. So you have time for your body to deal with the blood sugar that comes, rather than just, boom, there it is. When our blood sugar goes up, insulin is immediately released, provided that we're able to do that efficiently, and it should be stored away. But if we're eating constant simple carbohydrates, or not enough protein and fat to balance them out, our glucose levels tend to start to stay higher and we wear out the cells that create insulin. That's one scenario. So that balance and finding a way to slow our digestion is important for how well we process the food that we eat. Did that make sense? Okay.
So we need carbohydrates, like in a picture, drink Hershey bars.
Now, Hershey bar has chocolate in it, which is full of magnesium, and in reasonable doses can be a positive for you. So it's not about eliminating foods, it's striking a balance with foods. And as caregivers, it's very important that you all find that balance so that your health can be maintained. None of this happens without you. So finding a balance. And if you think about your plate, you want most of it to be your fruits and vegetables, those fresh, not starchy produce. Then you want some protein so that you've got building blocks, and then you want the carbohydrate piece to come in there. And that's bringing you fiber, and you may get some good fats from that and some other things too, B vitamins. But striking that balance is the most important piece, and we'll go through a little bit more of that. Okay, so protein digestion begins in the mouth, where most of our digestion starts. We chew it up, which is the beginning of breaking everything down. But most of that happens in the stomach because it takes the acids in our stomach to digest protein. As we age, we may find that there's a little bit less acid in the stomach. When that occurs, we can do things like adding fresh pineapple to the meal, because fresh pineapple, and it can't be canned. Have you ever tried to make Jell-O with fresh pineapple? I used to ask that question with older groups, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's terrible." But that line's gonna not play at all soon. With fresh pineapple, it partially digests the protein. So as the gelatin's trying to set, the pineapple's digesting it and it doesn't work. So if you add fresh pineapple to meals that are high in protein for an older adult maybe that isn't digesting as well, that can help with their protein digestion and maybe ease their stomach complaints a little bit, make sure that the protein is accessible to them, and that it can really be used. So how we use proteins. Our tissues are proteins, so it's really important that we get enough protein to heal ourselves. As we age, we heal a little bit more slowly, so making sure that we're hydrated, we have plenty of protein, and we have complete proteins to help heal ourselves. It's part of enzymes. Who here can still drink milk? Few people. I'm almost 60, I can still drink milk. I don't know why, but I'm thankful because it's my favorite. So if you can drink milk and digest it, you have lactase. That the suffix ase attached to lact, so it's lactose is the sugar in milk. That's a simple carbohydrate. And lactase is made out of protein by our bodies to break down that sugar so that it doesn't give us gas and it digests appropriately. Lactose intolerance is when you don't have enough lactase to digest the lactose. And so that's a protein and sugar interaction that happens in our bodies. Enzymes are catalysts for most of the functions in our bodies. So we need all types of proteins to make those things happen. It helps us to maintain our pH, which is very important. We're right in the middle, and if we move too much to either side, we don't survive. Our body takes care of that as part of homeostasis, which is marvelous. Fluid balance as well. Protein has a lot to do with making sure that you've got the right amount of fluids on the inside of the cells and the outside of the cells so that everything stays where it's supposed to be. Protein is a balancing food for our bodies. And it can be used as an energy source. Now, our brain's favorite food is glucose, as is the rest of our bodies. Protein actually has to be converted to glucose before we can use it, but the body knows how to do that. So if we are limiting the amount of sugar that we take in and the fat that we take in, it can use protein to make sure we stay alive. The body's job is to stay alive as long as possible. So it may break down skeletal muscle to use to make protein, which is why if someone's laying down and not walking around using their muscles, and if they're not eating enough, they can start to break down that muscle to stay alive. But when they stand back up, they're going to have a difficult time. Muscle wasting is something that we see in aging, but we don't have to. Unless the person just refuses to eat. It's important that we look at the composition of our diet on a regular basis, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. We're going to do a verbal exercise together about making snacks and different meals and how to put those pieces together. If we have diabetes in particular, it's important that we have the protein, carbs, and the fats in groups together for each meal so that our body processes the most efficiently. Any questions on protein? Lean proteins are, of course, the preference, but that doesn't mean you can't have your favorite thing every once in a while. Ribs probably are not the most nutritious protein that we can get a hold of. There's a lot of fat associated. If you like a sweet barbecue sauce, then there's sugar associated too. But ribs every so often and leaner proteins the rest of the time absolutely makes a balanced diet. And we need to be happy about stuff when we're eating. My husband says I feed him twigs sometimes, and I really don't, but it means he wants some ribs or something occasionally. And he has been avoiding the breakfast cereal. So how is fat used? The fat digestion begins in the mouth with the saliva, just like everything else that we're talking about today. But Most of this happens in the stomach and the intestines. The intestines in particular, because lipase is released. Lipase is that enzyme that breaks down lipids, which is what we call fat at that level. It is a storage form of energy. So our body's job is to stay alive. And historically, and I'm talking before written history, we would eat whenever there was whenever there was food, and we would eat in abundance and gain weight. And then that weight would sustain us until there was abundance again. So now that there's abundance all the time and we eat as much as we want, we've gained some weight and yet there's still abundance. So we're in kind of this loop now where we continue to eat with abundance or with abandon in our abundance and gain weight. And then not take it off because the abundance remains. So we haven't done a good job of us adjusting so much to the change in our environment. Fat is a padding that helps to protect our organs. So getting down to 0% body fat isn't a good idea either. Fat just under the skin is the reason that women are so much smoother than men, because we have additional fat stores just below the skin to do that. It's an insulator, but it's why we're so much smoother looking. Fat helps to balance our fat-soluble vitamins. So if we've been taking supplements of D, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and we've been eating a fairly fatty diet, we've got probably quite a bit of D stored, although most Americans are short of D. And then if we lose weight, we tend to release that D, so we're not building up too much. The same would be with K, E, D, what else is fat soluble? A, D, E, and K. So those are all fat soluble vitamins. You don't want to take overabundance of those in supplements because there's nowhere to go unless you lose fat. It just stores in the fat and we can get to toxic levels. Toxic levels of vitamin D would be at 40,000 international units rather than anything that we're normally taking. So you're not really in danger of that unless you're using crazy amounts of supplementation. And then there are some essential fatty acids. They help us to maintain skin turgor. Our cells don't leak. We're waterproof because of these fats, which is great. When we go in the ocean doesn't like soak in through our skin. And we don't leak outwards either most of the time, which is good. And it's because of those essential fatty acids that we're able to remain waterproof and cell integrity and all those great things that happen without us thinking about it. When carbohydrates are processed, it again begins in the mouth, but a lot more happens in the mouth than with the other nutrients that we've been looking at. You ever put a cracker in your mouth and it starts to turn really sweet while it's still there? Try it sometime if you haven't. Just a regular old saltine. The amylase in your mouth will digest it back to a simple sugar really quickly in your mouth before it even goes into the stomach. So we start that digestion process there, it continues, and then it goes to provide glucose for energy production. If you have had a deficit, it probably goes straight to your brain. And then all of these foods are whole grains, are complex carbohydrates for us that give us different fiber profiles, different vitamins and things. Now, some of these are really ancient grains when we talk about triticale, amaranth, spelt, but then we're into corn, oatmeal. Quinoa is actually a very high protein grain and at one point was used as money because it was so important to have that level of protein so that the people stayed well, that it became one of their most valuable things. And I always get confused, but I'm going to say it's the Aztecs. And then it'll be the Mayans, of course. But it's just interesting that when you see that it's so necessary for your people, it can become that valuable. And now we have all of these available to us in most grocery stores, and at least enough to be able to try some new things. And we've talked about all the things that that really does for us. All whole grains have some fiber, some oil, some protein. So getting a whole grain most of the time is the best idea. More nutritionally complete. Okay, so should we all eat the same foods? Nutrigenomics is a relatively new field of study, and it's about looking at our genetic makeup and what our genetic makeup requires us to eat. In the beginning, I was super happy about all the testing they were doing, and you can figure this out and go. The problem I started to have with the testing is if we do this kind of testing everywhere and I can see, okay, I'm going to be diabetic and this person's going to have this and this person's going to have this. Do our insurance premiums start changing? Like when we're born, I mean, if they can predict that, that's kind of terrifying. And will general healthy eating prevent those things? In a lot of cases, yes. So I'm really torn about having that piece of knowledge. Learning how we eat and digest and the results of that as we go through life, I think is the best way to modify how we're going to eat and live. Cultural food differences. So if I grew up in the very north of Wisconsin, I might be eating foods that are Finnish. So a lot of fish, a lot of bland grains, fermented fish. If I grew up there, would I have eaten what you all ate growing up? Did you eat fermented fish as a kid? No. What did you eat as a kid?
I grew up in eastern Kentucky, so I really ate a lot of the garden.
What time in Kentucky?
Urban center. Well, why don't we?
No. Maria.
Oh, well,
Cool. Yeah. Sorry. Um, yeah. So you're talking about that dish we were talking about earlier, fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh meats, and then some carbohydrates on the side, but probably not anywhere. It could have been sorghum though, because there's a lot of sorghum raised in Kentucky, and that was on that list too. What about you? What did you eat, Darla?
Can we take the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Normally I'm loud. Just not today. What did you eat as a kid?
Rice, peanut butter and jelly, and hot dogs.
What did you eat as a kid?
Lots of soups.
Yeah, soups are great when you eat. Everybody have a diet that is pretty spicy.
Uh, Cultural differences can be a big thing when we're talking about a group of caregivers. If we're all from one place, one demographic, then we tend to have more similarities. But race is a thing that you don't see with everyone. At senior centers, sometimes they're like, I eat rice, absolutely. But then, why do I have potatoes or spaghetti? Who eats rice? Run into those types of things. Not only is that a cultural difference, but our bodies are so adaptive that if that's what we've been eating and that's what our ancestors ate, we probably are born with the enzymes, we're working the potential for the enzymes to digest it. So if we're talking about things that we serve every day, like a senior center or school, African American kids tend not to digest milk well as young people. Um, the Native American kids don't digest milk well as young people. So when we're looking at different groups and then insisting, and we have to put a milk on every kid's tray, it's really not fair to do to some. Let's give kids gas and then send them to take tests. But the same thing can happen on adults as well. Most people lose their ability to digest milk. And it is the oddball, like myself, who remain able to later in life. So do we force them to take it? Take it if they want to. And sometimes there's legislation. But if you notice that someone you're caring for is maybe staying away from the milk, or when they have milk and there's gas issues, grumpy in the afternoon, some of those things might be a digestive issue. Um, Regional food differences. If I come in to try to take care of someone and I've been living somewhere else, when I first got to Georgia, I was trying to be a dietitian and send out Meals on Wheels food. And I didn't know that you had to have a permit to serve Koreans. And I got in on it. They actually said in initial normative that had that had to do with food, to have a conversation. Just like, do you know very much? I had cornbread before, but I didn't know it was a necessity to do. So understand those things mean a lot. And if I'm going to go take care of my grandmother, and she's been living in another part of the country her whole life, eating other kinds of foods I'm eating, I need to come in line with what she's doing. Or we can take, sample meals and have an adventure every so often, eat like me. But I need to be willing to be that flexible person for her. Yes.
How would you adapt to like a sudden change in diet? If you go to the doctor and they're saying that you have to move development, right? That's what you've been adapting your body to. Like in the South, like I've been with synthetic foods my entire life, but now I'm trying to eat healthier. So how would you adapt yourself to a healthier diet, eating more grains, eating berries and things like that?
Well, first you alter the cooking method. So we've got air fryers now. We can burn a lot of calories ready to air fryer. We can alter our cornbread recipes to make them less consuming. They're lower sodium, less actual fat. You still get that crispness. I've been doing things in an air fryer. And skinless thighs without sauce are great in the air fryer. And a lot less fat. Then looking at what are the vegetable things that person used to eat. Can we take an ingredient out? When they're doing collards or something like that, instead of using a ham hock, using a turkey neck. They say I never get time for chopping. I'm kidding. This was something we were doing a million years ago. Person, I guess it's been 18. So you can alter those things. The smoked turkey neck does not have the amount of cholesterol and fat that the ham hock has. It'll give you some of that smoke flavor. It is not a one-to-one replacement. So this is, you've got to talk with the person and say, this is what we've been instructed to do. I'm trying to take your recipes. Would you like me to help you with this? Because maybe that person has that ability. Or they can talk about how their parents did it, how their parents did it. But making those changes can happen and still be culturally competent, involving them. So you want to up the amount of fiber if we're trying to get rid of cholesterol thing, particularly when we're having saturated fat. So we can serve soluble fiber with high saturated fat, like bacon and eggs, have some okra. It is not the right stuff, which has a lot of soluble fiber to take that saturated fat and cholesterol with it. So that's a good way to mitigate that. So okra and tomatoes to help bring down the fat. cholesterol in the healthful meat. But it is possible to do that for the person's diet you're caring for. Age differences. So the lactose that we've been talking about, the amount that our bodies produce as we age decreases. So milk isn't something that we always serve in adults. It just depends on the digesting protein. As we age, the acid in our stomach can sometimes decrease, and that becomes more difficult as well. So things like papaya and pineapple can help digest those. Or taking dietary enzymes can help as well. My mom is not able to digest some of the FODMAP groups. Now those are, there's no test on FODMAPs. I just learned about these myself. Those are carbohydrate chains that sometimes are difficult to digest as we age. And so by eliminating one or two of them, it has changed her diet and her ability to digest them as well. English is the second language today. So navigating all of this, getting to know what the person that you care for likes, what you like, what their medical needs are, and how do we alter this diet to meet their medical needs and to keep us healthy as well. This is what happens when you leave your space. So how do we plan these meals? Please go with it. There we go. We want to think about putting together meals that are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And let's talk through how to balance what that breakfast looks like. So what are we going to have for our protein for this breakfast?
Peanut butter in the oatmeal.
Peanut butter in the oatmeal. Very nice. I like that. Now, we've got oatmeal and peanut butter. The peanut butter is not saturated, so we could add a little bit of butter to that oatmeal if we wanted. Mouthfeel is important. Can the person have milk on that oatmeal, or are we putting something else on there? Honey? We could do water. We could do oat milk. It doesn't necessarily have to have milk or some kind of liquid on it. It just depends on the consistency of it too. So we've got protein, fat, and carbohydrate all in that one dish. Very nicely done. Anyone else have a suggestion for how we're going to balance this breakfast? What's a different breakfast we could do? What's a protein? Eggs, very nice. And the eggs have protein, but they also have saturated fat. So what do we want for our carbohydrate? Yep. You could have eggs and avocado toast, absolutely. And I heard a bagel over here. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so the eggs and avocado toast, that's a great combination because the avocado actually helps your body to process cholesterol and get it out. If you pick a toast that is high in soluble fiber and regular and insoluble fiber, so maybe something that has some oats and some wheat in it, you've got that kind of cleaning action from the insoluble fiber and the other cleaning action where it soaks up the fat and the soluble fiber. So that was a great suggestion. Eggs and avocado toast, or eggs in a bagel. And we could do a whole grain bagel. I'm probably going to do an everything bagel if I order one though, because those taste so good. But you see how it goes? If you think about these three things every time you eat, the carbohydrate cannot rush directly to your system when it has these other pieces with it. It slows it down and allows your body to use it as intended. Sometimes when I'm at senior centers, I hear, I have breakfast, leave me alone, I have toast and coffee. What are we missing on toast and coffee? Protein. So maybe just a little slather of peanut butter, maybe just a little bit of ham on your toast, or whatever it is that that person likes to eat. can help start that day off. Let's try another meal.
Like a peanut butter banana protein wrap or like a.
Yeah. They can be. If the person enjoys it, will they eat it again? You know, as people we care for are aging, as for nutrition, they're fine. Does it really have low carbs, and was it fried to get it done? Sometimes is the question, because sometimes weird things are fried to get them completed. Like ramen noodles are fried to dry them out. They're not just noodles sitting there. So you have to get, yeah, it's a great way to get the liquid out of them when they first make them. So there are low-fat ramen noodles and then regular ramen noodles. And that's a weird hiding place for fat, I realize, but sometimes that happens in the processing. Sometimes tortillas are a good source, but they are made out of flour. There are chickpea tortillas. There are flats made out of cheese and eggs and all kinds of stuff. So depending on what the needs are of your person, all of those can be a way to get different foods into them. So let's make a snack. What's our protein for our snack? Turkey breast. All right. What are we going to serve with that turkey breast? So we don't have a lot of fat. We've got some room to have maybe 3 ingredients here. Okay, we're going to have turkey and cheese. And what are we putting that on for our carbohydrate? Crackers. Are there crackers that might be a better choice than just crackers? So there's different amounts of fiber in different crackers too. Saltines are just saltines. Yeah, Lisa. I like them a lot. They're nice for the system and they take up space. It leaves me calories to do and fills up the stomach. Soak up liquids. But almond vibrations are really good for the nervous system. And absolutely. Hummus is a great choice. The chickpeas are not a complete protein, which is what hummus is made out of, but a lot of hummus also has tahini in it. So that combination makes it complete. Texturally, they can become just about anything. I have not been brave enough to try the chocolate hummus yet. It looks like chocolate, but I just don't know. We have been eating a lot of chickpea pasta, which has a lower glycemic index, which simply means that it doesn't shoot your blood sugar up as much as regular pasta. It does have a tiny bit of grit in its texture when it's fully cooked. I made it the other day and my husband said, I don't think these are done. I'm like, they're done. If I cook them anymore, they're gonna fall apart. It's just because it's got chickpeas in it and not flour. But if someone isn't gonna be that picky about it, he's like, what is this feeling? This feeling is you cooking dinner tomorrow. But there are little changes that can happen. And for some folks, they don't matter. For other people, like Chris Johnson, no grit in his pasta. Okay, let's do lunch. What might we serve somebody for lunch? And you don't have to do what the picture is. Looks like we just served onions and shrimp and rice. I like it. Salmon rice boil. So we've got rice in there. We can have all kinds of accessory flavors in there, like maybe some pine nuts with the rice, or different herbs and spices to bring out different flavors in the sauce that we might put on that. What's our fat? Now we're getting some from the salmon, And that's what type of fat?
Omega-3.
Omega-3, there you go. Okay, what other kind of fat might we put in there?
Olive oil.
A little olive oil with the rice. Maybe we're making a rice pilaf and that's salmon and then some vegetables on top of that. That's a great lunch. Are you starting to see like ways to put together meals for the person you're caring for that you might be able to apply their favorites to this simple little equation? Just having all three of those every time we sit down to eat. Even if someone doesn't have a diagnosis for diabetes, it does help to balance how our body responds to the food, how well we use it, and then are we preventing the development of diabetes or glucose intolerance for the future. So managing all of these things helps to keep us all in line. And I very much adopted sort of a basic diabetic eating pattern because all of us have the potential if we go awry. Type 2 diabetes is a matter of inflammation and things that we can control most of the time. But if we get there and don't know how to control it, then that's the problem for us.
You had mentioned the Meals on Wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So is that, do they apply these principles?
They do. I actually helped to do that analysis here for Legacy Link. There are dietitians involved with the Meals on Wheels companies. There are dietitians involved with this level as well. Sometimes there are some that come in to the senior centers and Meals on Wheels.
So are all the senior centers, do the Meals on Wheels have the same like meals that they serve?
No, there's set standards based on the dietary guidelines for Americans. And so 72 and male, I believe, is what everybody is settled on. So we work from that and then expand into all these different types of meals that we can do. I'm steaming up my glasses. So really, any meal can fit into this pattern. We just have to look at the calories, then the percentage of fats, saturated fats, no more than 10% of the calories from saturated fat. You need X amount of protein per person. And we all kind of sit down with different programs and figure out whether or not that balances for what our goal is. I look at what someone else has done to make sure that they're analyzing fully cooked meals, not just, I've seen people do things like a cup of dry beans or a cup of beans as the carbohydrate, but instead of using a recipe for beans and using a cup of cooked beans, it might be just a cup of dry beans. So the fiber is going to be outrageous. And then their week looks phenomenal because they had all that fiber on one day, which no one is going to eat a full cup of dry beans. Even once it's cooked, it's going to be an enormous amount of food. So there are some pitfalls we can get into there. But as long as we're doing recipes and balancing all that stuff out.
So is Meals on Wheels a non-perishable
It,
frozen thing?
well, it could be frozen. A lot of places have hot meals.
Hot meals.
Mm-hmm. Now there's there's pantry setups where, a pantry bag might be delivered if someone's still cooking. And it varies from region to region what's available. Legacy Link is one of those organizations and it takes care of this part of the state. There are 12 such organizations in Georgia called Area Agencies on Aging. And Legacy Link looks after the Georgia Mountains region. And they have some programs where they're taking care of the rest of us too, but that's because this is a unique place. Each of those sets the standards and the goals. And so like Melissa here and Lisa, they work on what's going to happen. And then they bring in people like me to say, okay, yes, this meets all the things that you want it to do. Then it's up to the meal provider to produce the quality that they also want.
Okay.
Absolutely. So here's a dinner. What would we like to serve for dinner?
Grilled chicken, asparagus, and sweet potatoes.
Fantastic. You did a great job. So we've got bright orange from the sweet potatoes, which also are a good source of fiber. They have a better glycemic index than white potatoes, which means they're impacting our blood sugar less. The asparagus is high in fiber as well, and it actually removes pesticides from the bloodstream. So great choices there. And then the grilled chicken is lean. We probably have enough calories left over to do an amazing sauce. So do we hit all the points that we want there? We're probably the lowest on fat, so we could put a little butter on our sweet potato if we wanted to, or we could save it for another meal, frankly. I know this is repetitive, but I think just understanding that each of these three things every time, that there are ways to do fantastic meals with that, but that even in a snack, we're more satisfied by a snack that includes all three than we are by, well, imagine having celery or ants on a log. Peanut butter and raisins, if you eat those, are a great way to balance out that celery. Or if you don't eat peanut butter, maybe some cream cheese with that. Or if you've got some cheese that you're going to have, maybe serving it with apples so that you balance out all of those pieces. So it's more beneficial. Now, how do we provide enough nutrition as caregivers? It's more than just the calories. It's if someone that we're caring for starts to eat less, or maybe they're not chewing and swallowing as well. It takes 52 separate muscle functions to swallow. If, as we age, one of those goes awry, then we need to be able to change the texture. Sometimes we'll see people pocketing food, so they may be chewing for a while, but really that chicken is right there. And we can be really good at hiding that. So being a good observer as you're caring for your loved one. Are they coughing every time they try to swallow? That's another indicator. And so it's a good idea to get them to their physician and maybe have a speech therapist evaluate. They can do an x-ray that's kind of a moving x-ray so that they can see the actual swallow as it goes down. Then you can see, well, at this phase of the swallow, this isn't working, or everything's fine here, but not here, so we need to do this. Even swallowing water can become really difficult for someone. Thin liquids are hard to swallow once we start to not have that musculature in our throats and back of our mouths and things. So we thicken liquids in nursing homes. And imagine if your water for the day was the texture of pudding. It's really difficult to get that into someone. So making sure that you are serving a thickened soup so that they're getting enough liquids along with the nutrition, because if thickened water is all you've got, it's not very delightful to drink that. So we as caregivers have to find other ways to get that liquid into them.
So what are some good ways to help them stay hydrated
So if they're having thickened liquids and it's summer, Jello pops are a good way to go because it's a little bit thicker than regular water and it's got some flavor, and the cooling is always nice. Adding additional liquids, even if they're thick, to combination meals can be really important. So serving soups, if you're giving them medication, give them a little bit bigger cup with that thickened liquid to get the pills down than you would normally. But just adding little bits of it in throughout the day is really important, particularly if they're on thickened liquids. Yes? Fresh fruits and vegetables have an awful lot of water in them. All of our foods have liquids in them unless they're dry. So we're getting liquid all the time. Adding flavors to your thickened liquids can help quite a bit. They may look at it as a dessert, which makes it more palatable than if you think about it as this is water. But yeah, most of our foods have a great deal of liquid in them, and the fresh produce in particular. So what are some examples of foods that seem like a lot of water? Watermelon, there you go. Cucumbers, things like that are full of liquids. Making sure that you have a contrast. So if your loved one is developing dementia, it may become more difficult for them to identify the food from the plate from the table. So if I have some beautiful ceramics that are in shades of brown, and I set it on this table, it's going to blend into the table. If then the meal that I'm serving is roast beef with brown gravy, I've got brown. White tables, white plates, and chicken and mashed potatoes is white. So thinking about that from a high contrast standpoint is important. If you've got a white table with a white plate, how about a red placemat? If your loved one is developing issues with being able to get everything on a fork, how about a lit plate? You can buy those to just strap onto any plate, so it just clicks, and then they can press against that lip to get the food on the utensil and still feel empowered. Imagine at your age right now having somebody tell you that they're going to feed you. It's not empowering. You don't want somebody poking food in your mouth. So, sorry. The best thing we can do is to empower them to eat however they can eat. This has been an issue sometimes when you think about somebody's mother coming in who's always been the height of class and style and now wants to eat with her hands. Well, we need to respect our loved ones their whole way through the journey. So thinking about things like finger foods, there's actually clinical research that tells us that people with dementia or cognitive decline prefer finger foods. It's easy for them to deal with. We can do pretty finger foods. I mean, finger sandwiches, fresh produce, things like that, and having dips. So if you did a peanut butter sandwich and you just did strips of that, so it looked kind of fancy, and then jelly to dip, it gives the person living with dementia or cognitive decline an activity that they can actually succeed at during that meal. They're still an active part of their life, and they're getting the nutrition in. And getting those foods into them is really important, because with dementia, people tend to start not eating as much, or not recognizing the food, or not knowing how to interact with it. So as caregivers, we can be the ones to show them. Ensure that your care partner can model eating behavior. So rather than giving them something to eat and feeding them, sitting down across from them and say, I'm really enjoying this today, but you've done that activity in front of them, and sometimes that's all the cueing an individual will need. So whether or not we're starting with someone who's recently been diagnosed with blood sugar issues or having an increase in cognitive decline, there are things and activities that we can do as caregivers to ensure that they're getting the most out of those meals. Finger foods, and then making decisions about next steps. And I put this in there because I do contract work with a nursing home as well. And there's kind of a toss-up for people. Individuals go to a nursing home for the end of life. They start to decline, and their food intake decreases and decreases and decreases. And if you can't get somebody to pay attention to the food, you can't get it in their mouth. If they're distractions, you've done everything to keep it quiet. The birds, you can't stop them from chirping, but that's all that they're going to listen to right now, or they won't open their mouth anymore, or they're not remembering to swallow. When we get to the end of life, we have to make some decisions. Do we want to do a tube feeding? Are we going to keep them eating and going forward as they're doing less and involved less? So that's a decision that sometimes has to be made. Hopefully none of you will have to make that decision, but I just wanted to add it here so that it was something to consider. Letting your loved one age with dignity, or would they want a tube feeding? Because each of us is different. I have some people who just we couldn't get enough food in them anymore, but they're out and active in that nursing home every day. So there's no one answer to all of this. It's finding that right answer for your person. So what are macronutrients? Do you remember? It's the big three we've been talking about the whole time. Absolutely. Some people would add water into that group. We can or can't. Either way is fine with me. The differences between each of them, one big difference, besides that they're functionally different too. Calories for fat are 9 calories per gram. Calories for carbohydrates and for protein are 4 calories per gram. So when we say, well, fats are good for us, and then we eat a tablespoon of coconut oil in our coffee in the morning, that is 9 grams of calories per gram of, or 9 calories per gram of fat on that spoon. So there's more calories in there. So it's not a simple matter of, oh, I eat fat with this, I'm doing better. It's striking that balance, getting enough calories but not too many, getting the right amounts of each of these things to keep our body functioning. And no, we shouldn't all eat the same food. I'm pretty sure that we all wouldn't like the same food. And respecting that as we move forward with elders that we care for. They have preferences and tolerances. They have things that they just never wanted to eat. And if we can know those before they can't tell us, it makes for a much more pleasant transition. Are there any questions that you all have for me? Yes.
I have a question. So, that I've heard of before, a lid on a plate.
Yeah.
So to me, it sounds like an accommodation. I'll definitely be Googling that. So
You can buy plates that have the lips on them, so there's nothing to attach. That your person would have their own set of dishes.
my question is, they have hubs that not like this with a lid, but that help to prevent spills.
I am very dissatisfied with the cups that are available to us currently. I've actually wrote to Tervis and said somebody needs to come up with something that doesn't look like a baby sippy cup for grown-ups because they're grown-ups. And even if you can't do what you used to, you've still been the adult that you've been your whole life. And so no, not yet. And Tervis has not written me back, so I'm going to Yeti. Somebody's going to make me a cup because they'll sell. I'm not asking for any of the money. I just want to be able to order these for people in nursing homes. The biggest issue is that they look like children's cups. Now, if we can make them, because, you know, most of the people in here have something like that. If we can make it, but those are kind of heavy.
They're heavy. Even after it's smaller, I would take the lids off. I would buy. That's something that my kids can't take them off, but that it doesn't look childish.
Yep.
You can see that they're filled with training.
It does. You know, that question comes up a lot. And if you all have ideas, I encourage you to reach out to the companies that make the drinkware. There's a cup that they're selling for an outrageous amount of money in England right now. And I think it looks as bad as any of the rest of them. But the ideas will come from people like you, the people who are out there using them and doing this in the field. So if you get an idea, send it to them. because we can improve what's available to us. Well, I thank you very much. I apologize for rolling in late and jumping up here.